Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the podcast. And today I'm going to do my review of AEW's Dynamite. Before we even talk about this show, man, let's talk about some of the new stuff that was presented last night on AEW. After Revolution, Tony Khan was hinting around that AEW was going to go into a new era, a new season, and that's exactly what we got last night. To start off the show, we got the brand new intro to Dynamite, which I thought was absolutely fantastic. New colors like in the background and stuff like that, so completely different than what we were getting here for a while with the old setup that AEW, the old presentation that AEW had. The other biggest thing was obviously the new stage structure, the new setup for the stage and everything else like that. Like I said, different color schemes, stuff like that. It was a lot more like purple and orange and stuff like that, different colors that color schemes that we've seen before with Dynamite, especially with the stage and the intro video to Dynamite. To me, honestly, the presentation was awesome. I think this was something that AEW really needed to get back to and be fixated on. I know a lot of people were hinting around, even with the old setup, that it had a lot of resemblance to WWE. And to me, was I against the old stage setup? No, I wasn't. I mean, I think it was something that was, obviously new from the original setup. There was a whole new dynamic, more LED screens, stuff like that were added to the show. But with this last night and the presentation that we got with Dynamite, I'm not against it. I know a lot of people were also mentioning with the new setup, it kind of gave off NXT 2.0 vibes, which I'm not going to disagree with that. To me, honestly, getting, the tunnels back again, it's going to have to take some time for me to get used to it personally. But people also need to realize this. AEW needs to be the alternative. They need to be a completely different entity than what WWE is, obviously. And it is a competitor. AEW is a competitor to WWE and vice versa. So AEW needed to have a presentation that was a hell of a lot different than what we were getting with WWE. And that's what we got last night. The other biggest thing is, like I mentioned earlier, was the tunnels. Now, some people, like myself, might be kind of against the tunnels at first. But honestly, I think eventually we can all just warm up to it, because this is another great way for AEW to tell storylines. And basically what I'm saying to you is that with the two tunnels, you obviously have a babyface tunnel and a heel tunnel. So it can also tell its own storylines alone just by using those tunnels, like who might come through the heel tunnel or come out through the heel tunnel and who might come out through the babyface tunnel. So the presentation as a whole, though, to me, honestly, I think it's great. I love the new color scheme. It's a whole new dynamic for AEW and kind of separates them from WWE or looking WWE-ish. So I'm all for that. And I think it was a great presentation from AEW and Tony Khan last night with Dynamite. Getting into the show, we have a Swerve segment. He comes down to the ring with Prince Nana, grabs a microphone. He talks about Revolution. It says that he came up short against Samoa Joe and Adam Page. Swerve talks about him signing his contract with AEW. In the mission statement that Swerve had when he signed a contract with AEW and was on the stage when he signed his contract and being interviewed by Tony Schiavone, Swerve said that he will become one day AEW World Champion for that company. But he said after he lost that match at Revolution that maybe, just maybe, he doesn't deserve a title shot. Swerve says that he doesn't want to let the fans down as well. Swerve says he still wants a title shot in time. And then after that, Samoa Joe walks down to the ring, grabs a microphone. He mocks Swerve. Joe says that Swerve's house is in his world. After that, Undisputed Kingdom come out. Cole then hypes up Undisputed Kingdom. Cole then mocks Swerve. Cole then says Joe's next challenger will be Wardlow. Swerve then grabs the microphone, mocks Undisputed Kingdom. He also mocks Adam Cole. Cole says that next week, Taven and Bennett will face off against Joe and Swerve. And then Schiavone gets involved and says, no, that match will happen right now, which gets us into our first match, an impromptu match, if you will. It is Samoa Joe teaming up with Swerve versus Matt Taven and Mike Bennett. I thought it was a good match, man. It was a back-and-forth matchup between both teams with Joe and Swerve keeping the pace of the match. Swerve hits a Swerve stomp on Bennett, and then Swerve ultimately hits the finish on Matt Taven, pins for the 3, and your winner of the match, or winners of the match, are Samoa Joe and Swerve. After that, Wardlow is seen walking down the ramp, causes a distraction with Swerve, which allows Joe to attack Swerve from behind. And after that, it looks like the announcement from AEW and Tony Khan that it will be Samoa Joe defending the AEW World Championship against Wardlow next week for AEW's big business show. So I'm definitely looking forward to that. But again, hats off to Samoa Joe and Swerve for getting the win in that matchup. Moving on from that, we have our next match of the night. It is Hook versus Brian Cage for the FTW Championship. I thought this was a good match, man. Back and forth matchup between Hook and Cage, with Hook keeping the pace of the match. Hook hits Cage with a trash can lid. Cage then gets back involved in the match by hitting a power slam on the outside on Hook. Cage then goes for an F5, but Hook counters it with a DDT. Hook then hits a T-bone suplex on Cage. Hook then hits another T-bone suplex on Cage on the barricade. Cage then gets up, hits an F5 for a near fall. Hook hits another T-bone onto some tacks that were laid in the middle of the ring. Hook then applies a red rum, and your winner of the match and still FTW champion is Hook. After the match, Hook was attacked by Mobile Embassy. Jericho comes down to the ring to save Hook. So it looks like Jericho is going to possibly align himself with Hook. But hats off to Hook for getting the win in that matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Killswitch versus Matt Menard. I thought it was an okay matchup. Back and forth matchup between Killswitch and Menard, with Menard keeping the pace of the match. Killswitch then hits a choke slam on Menard, and then Killswitch ultimately hits the finish on Menard, pins for the 3, and your winner of the match is Killswitch. After the match, Garcia comes down to the ring, he attacks Killswitch, and then Nick Wayne gets involved by attacking Garcia. Adam Copeland shows up on the stage. He ends up attacking Killswitch and Nick Wayne from behind. Copeland then chases after Christian Cage, which ends up going through the arena to the parking lot area. Cage takes off in a car. And then Copeland says it will be him versus Cage in an I Quit match in Toronto. So it looks like I said before, that the storyline between Copeland and Cage is far from over. Moving on from that, we have a Kyle O'Reilly segment. He's being interviewed by Renee backstage. O'Reilly says that he never thought he'd return to wrestling again from his injury. I think he was away for 2 years. O'Reilly then talks about doing things on his own, and it looks like O'Reilly won't be joining the Undisputed Kingdom. So I think that's very interesting to see, and I definitely look forward to what's going to happen next with Kyle O'Reilly. Moving on from that, we have a Young Bucks segment. This was pretty much hyped up throughout the entire night. They're supposed to make 2 big announcements. Young Bucks get down to the ring to grab a microphone. They mock Darby and Sting. Young Bucks then say they're going to be entering a tag team tournament to crown new AEW tag team champions. Matt then announced that Page is suspended indefinitely, and that Omega, since he's been out with injury, is now fired from AEW. Eddie Kingston comes down to the ring. He mocks the Young Bucks. Eddie then attacks the Young Bucks, but the Bucks end up attacking Eddie Kingston as well. And then all of a sudden, we hear music hitting the, and a Titantron being played. Then it's Okada. Okada shows up. He ends up attacking Eddie Kingston, and then shows Eddie Kingston that he wants an opportunity at the Continental Crown. And it looks like we're going to get that match here relatively soon. A couple things I want to say about this, man. Number one, this was a great segment from the Young Bucks, especially with the announcements that they, are going to enter this tag team tournament. And hopefully it has a lot of resemblance to the Continental Classic and how they did that. And hopefully we get that same kind of deal with this new tag team tournament. But the biggest takeaway was Okada. There was a lot of speculation that Okada was going to be at AEW Dynamite last night. He was in the States. I think he flew from Japan over to LA. He was in LA for a little while. So there was a lot of speculation prior to Dynamite last night that Okada was possibly going to show up last night, and he did. But the biggest takeaway was Okada turning heel and then joining the Elite. So I think that was the biggest takeaway for me when I was watching this, because, the Young Bucks and Okada kind of set up their own storylines, multiple storylines within one segment. And what I mean by that is it looks like Okada's first match is going to be against Eddie Kingston for that Continental Championship, which I'm all for that. I'm a big fan of Eddie Kingston, but I would not mind seeing Okada hold the Continental Crown Championship. I'm all for that as well. A little surprised that he came in as heel. I know a lot of fans over from New Japan were kind of upset that Okada turned heel when he got into AEW last night. But I'm all for Okada versus Eddie Kingston. The other biggest things I took away was the Young Bucks mentioning Adam Page and saying that he was suspended indefinitely, and then Kenny Omega being fired from AEW. So to me, it looks like Page will be back here relatively soon. I know he wanted to take some time off after Revolution, but them mentioning Omega and kind of, sliding him into a storyline, I can see Omega coming back here relatively soon. And to be honest with you, and I mentioned this a while ago, if everybody can stay healthy, man, in AEW is going to have one hell of a year in 2024, in my honest opinion. I'll talk more about that towards the end of this podcast, but I thought this was a great segment from the Young Bucks and the arrival of Okada. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Rio versus Chris Statlander. I thought it was a good match. Back and forth matchup between Rio and Statlander, with Statlander keeping the pace. Rio then hits a Northern Light suplex on Statlander, as well as a Hurricane Rana. Rio then hits a Dragon suplex on Chris Statlander, but Statlander gets up, hits a power bomb on Rio. Stokely then throws in a chain into the ring, causes a distraction with the referee. Statlander then picks up the chain and then throws it out of the ring. Rio then hits a roll-up on Statlander, pins her for the 3, and your winner of the match is Rio. After the match, it looks like Chris Statlander was frustrated with Stokely. So it looks like there's an issue there between Statlander and Stokely. And to be honest with you, I will not be surprised if we see Chris Statlander turn heel. I'm just letting y'all know that now, man. I will not be surprised if we see Chris Statlander turn heel. Moving on from that, we have a Darby Allin segment. Darby comes down to the ring with a bat, same bat that Sting had. Darby talks about Revolution and what it meant to him, and Sting's final farewell match and how much it meant to Sting. Darby then hypes up Sting, says he's one of the best. Darby then says he's going to be climbing Mount Everest, and that he don't know if he's going to come back from that or come back to AEW. He thanks the fans and AEW. Darby says that he can't replace Sting, and it's another reason why they're vacating the belts. And after he says that, Darby then throws the title down on the wrestling mat and then goes to walk away, goes to walk out of the ring. And then he is interrupted by Jay White and Bullet Club Gold. They come down to the ring. Jay then hypes up Darby Allin. He also talks about Revolution and what Darby and Sting did at Revolution. Jay White then was trying to recruit Darby Allin. Darby then grabs the microphone, mocks Jay White. Darby then points the bat at Jay, just like how Sting used to do back in the day. And we're going to get this match between Darby Allin and Jay White next week for AEW's Big Business. Definitely looking forward to that. Moving on from that, we go into our main event of AEW's Dynamite. It is Will Ospreay versus Kyle Fletcher. I thought this was a great match, man. Back and forth matchup between Ospreay and Fletcher. Ospreay hits a Hurricane Rana on Fletcher in the middle of the ring. Fletcher was trying to keep the pace of the match. Ospreay then hits a handspring Pele kick on Fletcher. Fletcher then hits a devastating brainbuster on Ospreay for a near fall. Ospreay and Fletcher then both exchange in the middle of the ring, with Ospreay hitting an Os Cutter off the apron on Fletcher. Ospreay then hits a step up enziguri. Fletcher then goes for a tombstone, but Ospreay counters it with a poison Rana. Ospreay then hits a Liger Bomb on Fletcher for a near fall, but Fletcher gets up, hits a Liger Bomb of his own for a near fall on Ospreay. Ospreay then gets up, hits a poison Rana off the top rope on Fletcher. Ospreay then hits a Spanish Fly as well. Ospreay then goes for an Os Cutter, and then Ospreay ultimately hits his signature Hidden Blade on Kyle Fletcher, pins him for the 3, and your winner of the match is Will Ospreay. After the match, Ospreay was interrupted by none other than Bryan Danielson. Danielson gets in the ring, and him and Ospreay kind of have a stare down in the middle of the ring, which I think Danielson is going to be the next challenger to Will Ospreay, which I am absolutely all for that. Couple of things I want to say about Dynamite and my thoughts of what I think is going to happen here in the near future. Let's talk about AEW's next show coming up, Big Business. I think Big Business is going to be absolutely awesome. It's going to be live from the TD Garden in Boston next week. I believe it's next week. It's going to be a great show. From top to bottom, it's going to be a great show. But again, we are going to be getting the arrival, I believe, of Mercedes Moné. And I think Moné is going to be a great addition to the AEW roster, especially the AEW locker room. She can be a locker room leader. And again, this goes back to what I said earlier, man. If everybody stays healthy, this AEW is going to have one hell of a year. You bring back Jamie Hayter. You just brought back Thunder Rosa, Serena Deeb. Hayter comes back. Britt Baker comes back. They have a solid foundation for that women's roster. Solid. Especially with the possible addition of Mercedes Moné, which is going to be absolutely incredible. And if you guys really think about it, man, they have Ospreay, Okada, and possibly Mercedes Moné all under one roof with AEW. AEW is going to be firing, even last night, AEW is going to be firing all cylinders, man. And like I talked about earlier before the show even really took off last night, obviously the new intro video for AEW, the video package. There was a lot of things that were a lot different last night with AEW that I actually really agreed with. The Copeland Christian backstage kind of brawl, if you will, leading out to the parking lot, setting up that storyline, fantastic. And then the impromptu match that happened last night with Swerve and Joe going up against Matt Taven and Mike Bennett. I thought that was a great idea from Tony Khan and AEW. We haven't really got much impromptu matches on AEW, so I thought that was a really good sign to see for the foreseeable future. Obviously, Okada showing up last night. It was rumored and speculated that he was going to show up. He ended up debuting last night with AEW and joined the Elite. So, again, joining up with Matt and Nick Jackson. He's going to be a heel. You know, obviously the Young Bucks call out Adam Page and Kenny Omega during that segment and said that Page is suspended indefinitely and that Kenny Omega is fired from AEW. So I could see Kenny Omega possibly coming back here soon to be a part of the storyline. And like I mentioned earlier, the new stage structure and all that, I'm all for it, man. I think AEW needs to be vastly different than WWE. And I think this was a good step in that direction for AEW and Tony Khan. Bringing back the tunnels, that pretty much what brought them to the dance, to be honest with you. When AEW came into fruition, they had the tunnel, or the tunnels. I think it's a great setup, to be honest with you. It brings a whole new dynamic to AEW, gets more eyeballs on the product. And AEW is going to be firing on all cylinders, man. You know, they brought in Ospreay, brought in Okada, possibly bringing in Mercedes Moné. It is going to be one hell of a year for AEW in 2024, and I think this summer for AEW is going to be insane. I really do. Obviously, they got the next pay-per-view coming up April 21st, I believe, with Dynasty. Again, man, it's going to be a great show. And like I said, with all these injuries and people starting to slowly come back, Adam Cole might come back here soon. MJF, he's definitely missed in AEW, and having him come back, the top of the card for AEW is going to be insane, man. Absolutely insane. And they're slowly starting to build storylines and get fans invested. So I'm all for it. I'm absolutely all for it. I think AEW is going to be firing on all cylinders. But I also want to see what happens with Collision. I'm definitely interested in what happens with Collision. Are they getting a new stage? Are they getting the same stage set up as Dynamite? You know, is there going to be more storylines on Collision now? So it definitely looks like Tony Khan and AEW are definitely listening to the fans, because the fans were desperately waiting for a change. And I think we finally got that, a little bit of that last night. And I think AEW is definitely bringing in a new era for the fans in AEW and Tony Khan. I think they're all bringing in a new era, and this is going to be one hell of an era for AEW. And I think 2024 is going to be a strong year for AEW this year. I'm definitely excited and anticipating what's going to happen next with AEW. But with that being said, this is my review of AEW's Dynamite. I hope you guys are out there staying safe. Be careful, and remember, stay classic.